From the preteen ritualistic floggings to the extreme sacrifices made in the name of their city-state, today we look at bizarre things the ancient Spartans did. Number 9. Infant inspections. Known historically as a warrior people, ancient Spartans began their road to battle readiness at adolescence. When Spartan boys were born, local elders would examine the child for any potential physical deformities. If the baby failed the test, they would at times be abandoned on a hillside, left to perish, or sometimes be adopted by foster parents from neighboring cultures. Once they passed this first qualification, children were conditioned before age 5 using tactics such as frugal feeding, wine baths to adjust the body, and discouragement from crying by way of silent treatment. By being forced at such a young age to deal with darkness and loneliness, the children were thought to have been strengthened for it. This type of child raising was so admired by other Greek city-states that Spartan nannies were often sought after by foreign employers. Number 8. Combat elementary. After the age of 5, Spartan boys were educated in the art of endurance through a type of militaristic training regimen called a Goj. These children would be sent off to a type of boarding school where they would stay in communal barracks. Here they would train with weapons and learn to carry and maneuver them with a type of dance called Pyrrhic. This taught the young soldiers in training to stay dexterous and nimble while granting experience with military instruments. The Agoj also taught boys to read, write, and sing traditional Spartan combat anthems. Team sports were also customary at this time as a way for the youthful Spartans to learn to work together and as a unit. All these instructions were a means to prepare the boys for a final competitive exam that tested their athletic, dancing, and singing capabilities. At age 12, these young males were no longer considered Pydians or boys, instead being promoted to the status of Meirakion. In this new role, the training intensity turned up as focus shifted to improving survival skills. This was done through the sacrifice of items like shoes, warm clothing, and full diets, as these harsh restrictive conditions were thought to help generate tougher, more durable, and in-shape men. Their physical attunement was especially required, as being overweight was strictly taboo, and even punished, with some even being banned from Sparta for their portliness. Despite this, the new meager diets weren't expected to be enough, and these young men were encouraged to steal food to get by. Though if they were caught, the punishments were severe. The competitiveness between the Meirakion was also raised as trainers would instigate fights between them, and even young Spartan women were enrolled to dole out ridicule and incite further divisiveness. This was thought to bring the best out of the trainees as they learned to channel emotion into action. Number 7. Test of endurance. One of the most brutal traditions of ancient Sparta came in the form of the Diamastagosis, or the contest of endurance as it's formerly known. This ritual was developed in honor of an event years earlier at the altar of the Greek deity Artemis, in which many lives were lost. The activities employed to commemorate the occasion were much more grim than modern celebrations, though. Used as a form of initiation to become a true Spartan soldier, this ritual was exerted exclusively on the Ephebes, or the boys that are still in training in the Agoj. Here they would be flogged mercilessly by older young men armed with sticks as they reached to take pieces of cheese from atop the altar. The event would continue until the stairs of the altar were completely crimson. Many would not live through this ritual, but those who did, especially the last one standing, earned praise from their peers and superiors alike. This contest would find a way to become even more heinous and violent as the years went on, when Rome invaded and occupied Sparta. At this period in time, Diamastagosis would transform from a religious ritual to a spectator sport, ushering people from across the Roman Empire to witness the spectacle. The brutality by which these young men were sacrificed was especially sought out by the bloodthirsty Roman Colosseum goers, who had developed a taste for such entertainment. This rite of passage had transformed fully from a 7th century BC altar-based tradition to a savage game within an enclosed theater by the 3rd century AD. Number 6. Spartan Secret Police. While Spartan soldiers were widely regarded to be the elite combatants of Greece, within their ranks was an even higher level of soldier in Sparta's own secret police, called the Crypteia. Once young men reached the age of 20 and showed promise as future Spartan leaders, they were chosen to enter the Crypteia should they so choose. As the Spartan Empire grew, so too did its enslaved Helot population, outnumbering Spartan soldiers 7-1 by the 5th century BC. To help curb any potential rebellions, the Crypteia were charged with the responsibilities of strictly overseeing Helot settlements, and this strict responsibility began immediately with their induction into the secret military sect. Elected Spartan leaders, called ephors, would direct the Crypteia to go on a rampage, targeting helots under the guise of purported revolts, resulting in an overnight slaughter and granting the soldiers freedom to act at will. Employing guerrilla tactics, the soldiers would ravage the helot settlements like a ravenous hunting party, seeking out the biggest, toughest helots to take down and bolster Sparta's alpha dog reputation. Number 5. Warrior garb. The iconic clothing of the Spartan army has been of much debate ever since the release of the 2006 Legendary Pictures hit action film 300. Bare-chested battle gear may be effective in drawing audiences to the local movie theater, but in reality, the ancient Spartans often opted for something a bit more sturdier by actually using armor. Sporting the muscled chiuras so as to resemble the finely sculpted torso of an ideal male body, the Spartans would wear armor for ages, including at the Battle of Thermopylae before going through a period without metal protection. But the unarmored period in Spartan history was relatively short, and they would return to employing heavy armor in 360 BC to comply with new battle tactics. Aside from their brass armor, Spartans were also known for their traditional red robes. These iconic crimson cloths were assigned originally by Lycurgus, an ancient Spartan lawmaker, under the belief that it was a less feminine color. In addition, it was believed that the red garments would hide their wounds and inspire fear in their enemies during combat. But even if the scarlet robes weren't assigned, given the expensive and regal nature of the dye, they were often chosen for soldiers' clothing by mothers and wives who took great pride in their male warriors. Number 4. Spartan kings. Given their competitive nature, it may come as a surprise that ancient Sparta was actually a diarchy, meaning the state was overseen and ruled by 2 kings. The 2 royal families of the Aegeads and the Eurypontids would take turns running military campaigns out of country and ruling their people from within. In a society that values masculinity above all, kings such as Leonidas from the Aegead family and Leodecutus of the Eurypontids were bold, courageous generals. However, regardless of their status or popularity, the kings were not immune to societal expectations and Spartan law. In the ancient culture's strange sense of equality and tradition, even royalty was subject to punishment for somewhat petty and arbitrary charges by today's standards. For example, King Archidamus was charged a hefty fine by Spartan lawmakers after violating a rule when he married a woman who was considered too thin to birth kings. This was somewhat rare in ancient history overall, as most rulers during this period were much less civil and often above the law. Number 3. Mandatory marriages. To keep the city-state consistently expanding with new Spartan soldiers, the society put a great amount of importance on creating a family and the institution of marriage. Sparta's strict requirements on breeding warriors meant they believed in a very specific window to procreate, and as such made it a law that all men were to be married by the age of 30. While many Greek city-states held traditions of marrying girls much younger, Spartan women were usually wed by the age of 19. Men were expected to marry based on the physical fitness and health of would-be partners, as this was typically considered the most important trait in a mate. However, even if a Spartan man found the perfect mate and married early, the couple would still have to live separately until that age 30 benchmark, as he would be required to continue living within military barracks. Loyalty to Sparta still came first, and this was proven further by the need to produce children, even if the male was incapable. Married women would sometimes have multiple partners to compensate, with collective children being claimed by all the potential parents in the arrangement. Those men that didn't get married in ancient Sparta would be considered to have failed their countrymen and would go on to be ridiculed at every public opportunity. Number 2. Battle of Thermopylae. The film 300 certainly brought this ancient battle to modern prominence. However, there were some details that went misrepresented in the adaptation of the 1998 comic book of the same name. The true motives behind the unbalanced armies are a bit more complex than the book or film let on. For one, the battle actually saw about 7,000 Greek soldiers fight against 80,000 Persian troops. Among those 7,300 of them were Sparta. The Greek city-states had many more soldiers at their disposal. However, the invasion came from the far north, about 95 miles outside of Athens, a risky distance from which it would be difficult to strategize. On top of that, the invasion came amidst the religious festival of Carnea, as explained in the film, but also during the sacred Olympic Games. Thus, all of Greece was hesitant to send their full forces, or risk angering the gods for failing their religious requirements. The Spartans did prove toughest, though, as Leonidas dismissed all other Greek troops once the Persian forces of Xerxes closed in, allowing Sparta to rise to epic glory even in defeat. Number 1. No surrender. If failing to live up to Sparta's cultural marriage standards was the equivalent of a misdemeanor, then cowardice was a Class A felony. In battle, this belief remained the same, with warriors instructed to never surrender. Fearless and honorable Spartan soldiers would more likely take their own lives rather than be taken prisoner or voluntarily concede victory. This concept wasn't exclusive to men either, as mothers were recorded as saying phrases like, "return with your shield," or "on it," to their sons before combat, valuing the courage of their children over their safety. This sacrifice was so sacred, in fact, that only two groups of Spartans would ever have their names inscribed on gravestones, one being men who perished in action. The other group? Women who passed during childbirth, as that was seen as the equivalent of sacrificing oneself for the future of Sparta.